It was one of those burning Texas afternoons when the air shimmered like glass and even the cicadas were silent. The Mercedes dealership sat on the edge of town, its large windows glinting under the sun. Inside, the staff lounged in the air conditioning, chatting lazily, until the glass doors swung open. A man stepped in, tall, dusty, and worn down by life. His boots were cracked, his jacket ripped, and his beard untrimmed. The smell of desert dust followed him. Every salesman turned to look, some smirking quietly. He didn't fit the kind of customer they were used to seeing, not with his torn clothes and tired eyes that looked like they'd seen too much of the world. Without a word, the stranger walked straight toward the display area. Outside, the sunlight glinted off the chrome bodies of 5 brand-new Mercedes-Benz trucks, the latest models, spotless and lined up in perfect symmetry. The ragged man paused for a moment, studying them carefully, then turned back toward the salesman. "I'll take those 5, he said, his voice calm, deep, and firm. The room fell silent for a heartbeat before a few snickers broke out. One of the younger salesmen, trying to impress his coworkers, laughed aloud and said, "Sir, those aren't toy trucks. Each one costs over $500,000. Maybe you'd like to see something more affordable." His tone dripped with mockery, but the man didn't react. Instead, he walked slowly toward the counter. The sound of his boots on the tile echoed through the showroom. Everyone watched, half amused and half curious, as he set an old, rugged duffel bag on the polished counter. It was faded brown and looked heavy, the kind of bag a man might carry through storms and years of hard travel. Then, without a word, he unzipped it. The laughter stopped immediately. Inside were stacks upon stacks of cash, fresh, crisp, and neatly bundled. For a moment, no one breathed. The young salesman who had mocked him turned pale, his jaw dropping slightly. The manager, an older man in a sharp suit, stepped forward, trying to mask his surprise. "Sir, where did you get this money?" he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. The ragged man looked him straight in the eye. His expression was calm, but there was something cold in it, the look of someone who had known struggle, rejection, and pain. He simply said, "From people who once laughed at me." His words hung in the air like a stone dropped into still water, heavy and echoing. Nobody dared to respond. The manager cleared his throat, nodded quickly, and began the paperwork. The others pretended to busy themselves, avoiding his gaze. In less than an hour, the deal was done. The man signed every form with a firm hand, took the keys, and pocketed the receipts. There was no joy on his face, no pride, only quiet satisfaction, as if this was not about wealth but about something much deeper. When he stepped outside, the sunlight wrapped around him once again. He opened the door of the first truck, the biggest one, black with chrome rims, and climbed in. For a moment, he looked back at the glass showroom. Inside, every salesman stood frozen, watching him with wide eyes. The man started the engine, and the deep growl of the Mercedes echoed across the lot. Slowly, he drove away, leaving behind a cloud of dust and a silence that no one dared to break. The laughter that had filled the room minutes earlier was gone, replaced by something heavier, shame and disbelief. And as the ragged man disappeared down the long Texas road, every person inside that dealership knew one thing. They had just witnessed a story they would never forget. 4 days had passed since the ragged man walked out of that Texas dealership, leaving behind a room full of stunned faces. Now he was on the long red highway that cut through the Arizona desert. One of his new Mercedes trucks rumbled down the road, its cargo space filled not with luxury goods, but with food, water, medicine, and blankets. The man drove with quiet purpose, his eyes on the horizon where the orange sun melted into the dust. He wasn't chasing wealth anymore, he was chasing meaning. The endless stretch of desert reminded him of his own journey, harsh, lonely, and full of lessons money could never buy. As the miles rolled by, something caught his eye, a small figure by the roadside, sitting near a rusted sign half buried in the sand. He slowed down, squinting through the glare of the sun. It was a little girl, no older than 7, her hair tangled, her clothes torn, and her lips cracked from thirst. The child didn't move when the truck stopped. She just sat there, trembling, staring blankly into the distance. The man felt a sharp pain in his chest, a memory of being forgotten by the world. He stepped out, the heat hitting him like a wave, and knelt beside her. Gently, he held out a bottle of water. She reached for it with shaking hands and drank desperately, tears mixing with dust on her cheeks. He wrapped her in a blanket from the truck and asked softly, "Where's your family?" But the child didn't answer, only looked at him with wide, frightened eyes. Without another word, he lifted her carefully and placed her in the passenger seat. The drive to the nearest town took nearly an hour, and during that time, the girl said nothing. She just clutched the blanket tightly, as though afraid it would vanish like everything else in her life. When they finally reached the hospital, the man rushed her inside. Doctors and nurses immediately took her in, asking questions he couldn't answer. He stayed until they told him she was safe, sitting quietly in the hallway as night settled over the desert town. Days went by, but he couldn't forget her face, those hollow eyes that carried both fear and innocence. He checked in with the hospital twice more, but the doctors only said she was recovering slowly. On the fourth evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, he sat alone in his small motel room, staring at the desert through the window. The quiet was broken by a soft knock at the door. When he opened it, 3 Apache women stood outside. They were elders, wrapped in traditional shawls, their faces lined with wisdom and age. One of them held a woven basket filled with herbs and handmade jewelry. The man's eyes widened in surprise. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice gentle. The eldest woman stepped forward and said in a calm, respectful tone, "You helped one of our children. You have our thanks, and our respect." Her eyes glistened in the fading light, her words heavy with sincerity. The man lowered his head, suddenly humbled. "I don't need thanks," he replied quietly. "Just wanted to do what's right." There was a long pause, filled only by the soft hum of desert wind. Then the woman smiled. A slow, knowing smile. "That's what makes you different from those who laughed at you," she said. The words struck deep, reminding him of the men at the dealership, of the years he'd been dismissed and mocked for his appearance. As the women turned to leave, the man stepped outside, watching them walk away into the desert twilight. The setting sun painted the horizon gold and crimson, and for the first time in years, he felt a strange peace wash over him. It wasn't the peace that came from success or money, it was the peace of knowing he'd done something good, something human. He looked toward the empty road, the wind carrying whispers through the sand. In that quiet moment, he realized the truth that had eluded him all his life. True wealth isn't measured by what you buy, but by what you give away when no one's watching.